Well, good morning to you all. Thanks for being here today. Special welcome to Linda. Linda's going to be helping with the baptism, which is going to happen right after the sermon. The baptism of her husband, Randall Martin. So thank you for being here. Welcome. And by the way, I'm glad you all made it past all the holes outside today. We will go back after church and pick the people up out of the holes that are trapped there now. I'll bring them communion too. Here's your wafer. Very sweet of me. We have a couple of really interesting stories in the Bible readings today. One that was read really was a beautiful reading. It was the James reading. The apostle is saying, well, he says at the very beginning, kind of sarcastically, he says something like, "Can you all who make such distinctions between the rich and the poor in your community, do you really belong to the Lord Jesus?" He says, "It's unbelievable. I can't believe that's true." Apparently there was a big problem in the church. The leadership, which would be people like me, really paying a lot of attention to the people who have money, and the people who don't have as much wealth were kind of pushed aside, which is kind of a common thing to do. I mean, money talks and money rules the world, and it's not supposed to be that way, of course, in the Jesus community, but sometimes that happens. So a big part of the reading in James is all about making distinctions between people. Who do you treat well and kindly, and who do you just push aside? And then in the other reading, it was a really fascinating reading, but before I get there from the gospel, I would like to point out some of the divisions and the distinctions that are part of our world today at this very moment. Distinctions and divisions tend to separate us, so that you'll be able to compare that to what's happening in the Bible. Still today, sometimes, like in the book of James, in the letter from James, there's distinctions between rich and poor. People pay more attention to the wealthy sometimes. They give more privilege, more attention to those who are better off. There are other divisions, though, that separate us today. Of course, there still seems to be an awful lot of bias and prejudice and separation between the different races, the different racial communities in the United States. Ever since the problems in Ferguson and different people dying, sometimes a black person dies and they say, well, was that because he was black? Or a policeman gets killed and they say, well, was that because he was a policeman? And there's lots of strife between us at this very moment, it seems like, in that particular area in our own country. And racial divide is not just part of the American world, is it? Probably not. There's all kinds of divisions happening in other parts of the world now that revolve around race. Because of the great strife and wars and meltdowns of the governments around the Mediterranean area, lots of people are trying to leave, right? It's in the headline day after day now about people trying to leave parts of the Middle East, and they're trying to get into the countries of Europe, Greece, Italy, Spain, and trying to make their way up to deeper into Europe. And they're struggling mightily trying to figure out how to or whether to take in those people. It's not really immigration. I've noticed they don't use the word immigration. They call it migration. People are just coming by the thousands and thousands to get away from strife and war and poor government, oppressive government in places like Syria, or from Egypt, or from Libya, Iran, Iraq. They're all trying to get out. They're all trying to leave. And the question is, where will they go? And sometimes racial divides happen there because most of those people have a different skin color than the people in Europe. And people are afraid of losing their cultural heritage or losing their cultural identity if they take in people who are so different from them. And of course, it's not just a racial divide. It's also, what country do you come from? And do we like the people? Do we like the people in your country? Should we let those people into our country? And divisions and separations over national boundaries and national identity is quite strong right now, especially there. And what else divides? If it's race and nationality, what's the other obvious division? Yeah, politics happens here for sure. And then the other one, even stronger, sometimes is religious, right? Lots of the people moving into Europe or trying to get there, they're not from traditionally Christian countries, at least not for the past couple centuries. I heard one authority from one of the countries say they were worried about letting so many Muslims and non-Christians into the country because they would lose their Christian identity. Which is kind of funny from 2 points of view. One is, very few people in Europe go to church anymore. And the second one is, perhaps you would strengthen your Christian identity if you let other people in. Because that's what Christ would do. So, if those are some of the divisions, religious, political, racial, and national, that are part of our world today, that are on the front page of every newspaper, let's look at some of the divisions that were happening in the Bible times. We mentioned from the book of James, divisions between rich and poor, people making distinctions, how they treat people depending on what their bank account looks like. Of course, there are other ones that come up in the great story we have from Jesus. Jesus is a Jewish person. And in the Jewish world in Jesus' time, there were tons of divisions, all different kinds. But it went like this. Let me give you a quick rundown. There were the very special people who could attend to and be at the central point of the temple in Jerusalem, the high priest. They could go into the Holy of Holies of the temple. There were upper sections of the temple where the next level of holiness resided, and the regular priests and the Levites in the Jewish world could go there. Then there was another section only allowed for Jewish men, because Jewish men had they were another class of the Jewish society. And then somewhere along the line fell the Jewish women, and they could be in certain other areas of the temple area. And then Jerusalem itself was considered the holy city, and that's where the Jews considered their capital, and that was the place where God would protect the city. They thought this was like God's city. Not only God's temple, but God's city. And then finally there was the Holy Land in general. People could say, well, this is Israel. Was given to us by God, and this is where the Jewish people reside. Far, far, far away on the outskirts of who was in and who was out were the non-Jews. So, the non-Jew is called a Gentile. They were considered complete foreigners, complete others, completely outside the realm of God's world. And guess where Jesus goes? He says, he left Israel and he went to the town of Tyre, T-Y-R-E, which is way outside of the boundaries of Israel. It was a Gentile land, non-Jews. He says he goes away there to be by himself, didn't want to hang out with anybody. But as would have it be, his name got out, and a Gentile woman came to him and said, could you help me with my daughter? She is ill and has an evil spirit. He says, look, I really came to the people of Israel first. And it's not fair to give the children's food to the dogs, he says. She says back to him, even the dogs get the crumbs off the table. He says, you're right. Go back to your daughter. You'll find she's better. So, Jesus crosses the biggest boundary, the biggest division, the biggest separation there was in the Jewish world. He goes to the Gentile world, connects with a Gentile woman, and gives God's presence and God's healing to people far, far away from Jerusalem, far, far away from the temple, far, far away from the Holy of Holies. That's where Jesus goes and says, no, God's life and God's love is meant for these people too. Jesus is constantly, always, every time, it seems like, crossing over the line in the sand, crossing over national boundaries, crossing over religious boundaries, crossing over even racial boundaries. It says she was a Syro-Phoenician. She's from Syria and Phoenicia. Not anywhere near Jerusalem. Not anywhere near Israel. And she finds him. He says, the crumbs are for you too. God is for all people, regardless of their nation or their race or even their religion. So, Jesus' world looked a lot like our world. Lots of divisions along national lines, racial lines, ethnic lines, lots of lines in the sand. And Jesus is crossing all of those and saying, God is for all those people. It is funny. I hope it doesn't step on too many toes, just enough. At the end of every political speech, what's the one thing the politician has to say? Has to say this. And I'll put 2 chickens in every pot and 4 Cadillacs in every garage, and I'm done with my speech. Now, what? God bless America. I'm sure God will bless America. But the whole world belongs to God. God bless Yemen. God bless Egypt. God bless Syria. God bless Iran. God bless Iraq. God bless Europe. God bless the white people. God bless the black people. God bless the yellow people. God bless the red people. God bless the Muslims. God bless the Jews. God bless the atheists. God bless the Christians, especially the Episcopalians. We're about to have a baptism here in just about 2 minutes. Because our baptismal liturgy is all about a person committing themselves to the path of Christ and the way of Christ and to the Jesus movement. The baptismal liturgy says, not only do you believe and love God the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, but will you seek and look for and search for the divine, the Christ, in all persons, every person? Will you love your neighbor as yourself? Will you respect the dignity that belongs to every human being? And because every human being has the tendency to be nationalistic and racially biased and ethnically centered, we will say, yes, I will respect the dignity of every person with God's help, because I know I will need help along the way. So Randall, as he makes those commitments to the way of Christ, is to the way of love. And a love that does not make distinctions, does not bring up boundaries or walls, or say, I love this person, not that person. He will follow the way of Christ. And we will renew our own baptismal covenant and say, we will follow the way of Christ. And we will not make distinctions, but respect the dignity of every human being even though it's hard to do. And we will be able to, because we'll say, yes, we will, with God's help. God's love is for everyone, all the time.